to the Curiosity Conversations with TDG. I have Joel Hansen today, and he's actually collaborated with brands such as the LA Clippers, Best Buy, Vancouver Canucks, Prezi, and Adobe to actually develop initiatives that drive brand awareness and earn media attention in front of Gen Z. He has been recognized by Daily Hive as one of Vancouver's top 30 tech influencers to follow, and also featured by GoDaddy as a thought leader in the influencer marketing space. So I'm excited to talk to Joel Hansen today and dive in. So one of my first questions, because I watched your TEDx that was just recently released, and I wanted to ask how it was growing up in a house of seven.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thanks for having me, Taylor. I think for me, I mean, if we were just chatting sports before this, but I think there's a huge value alignment between understanding how a team works and how a larger group can push forward goals and initiatives. And that was something I had the opportunity to learn quite young in my life, just seeing how my older siblings operated and how we had to take self-responsibility to really, work as a cohesive team. And I think that's something that stuck with me, through high school and university, and then actually led me to pursue a role in the business marketing world because I have a kind of a deep love for how teams work together and can push forward initiatives.
hmm And so that was one thing I was going to ask about too, because growing up in a house of seven is very different. I know I only grew up with I have an older brother, so a little bit different there, but I did play sports. So I did kind of get into that initiative, and I think that's why most kids should play sports to understand how to work in a team. But I guess,
Mm.
yeah, I guess you probably grew up learning either way, even if you were playing sports or not. You probably learned how to work in a team and how to get things done. Did you guys like delegate chores and stuff like that, or was that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think there was probably some delegation, but you know how that sometimes doesn't work and there's conflict. And so a lot of it was kind of figuring out how to, communicate your point of view or, validate someone else's concern. And I think it was it was supposed to be a healthy delegation, but sometimes it turned out to be conflict management. And
Yeah.
so great learning either way.
Yeah. So you said one thing in that TEDx, and this is continuation of living in the house of seven, but you said that when you were sitting at the dinner table, you guys would kind of reflect on people that would affect you. And I was just wondering if that's something that has helped you along the way to maybe take a look at yourself a little bit more. Because I know for someone that's your age, you're kind of a little bit obviously more, wiser than most kids your age, I would say. And you've been able to kind of take steps that, have, really propelled you into a situation that's a little bit, higher up than what most kids or most people your age would get to. So has that kind of helped you either in the reflection of, and kind of propelled you that way, or how do you think that that's really helped you even in the situation you're in now, or even along the way?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would probably be, um, seeing that there's a bigger process to everything that meets the eye. And I think that's tossed around a lot on, on social media. Like the big line is um, making sure that, when we're seeing other people's highlights, we're understanding that there's a process and a life behind it. And, there might be this facade of things that are going really well, whether it's sports highlights or, Instagram highlights or just a quick coffee conversation. I think the biggest thing I found is understanding that there's a process behind every person, every movement, and every brand. And at the end of the day, the more you get to know that person or that brand, you understand that there's been ups and downs and there's been challenges and triumphs. And I think the more we can be human and kind of realistic with each other, the easier it is to build a relationship. And so I think that's probably been the biggest learning.
Yeah, so you say like that has helped you along the way for sure then, because I guess being able to reflect is something that a lot of kids don't do or a lot of people don't do. I mean, some people spend once a week kind of reflecting or something like that, but it seems like that was pushed into you at a young age, which I think is, something that probably has played a big part in your life now.
Mm,
because reflecting is like, I think I was recently watching, I think it was Matthew McConaughey on Joe Rogan,
mm,
and just talking about how like obviously he wrote a journal, or he would just reflect on his day at the end of the day, which he even said would be a struggle because most people, even if you find yourself in most cases, like even with my girlfriend or people's significant others, they ask you, oh, like how was your day, and you usually just say good. I think that that's something that if that's been drilled to you at a young age and is able to help you, then it's such a good thing to have to be able to just elaborate or try to reflect on certain things, especially if you want to go farther. Because obviously, if you're talking about branding, it's understanding who you are, or where you've been, or marketing too is like reflecting on how did that thing go, or
mm.
that marketing campaign go to then take it and go to the next level, which is cool because obviously that's something that not a lot of people get to experience in a way. A lot of people just push things out or something like that. So it's kind of cool that you've been able to, take that and run with that.
Mm, yeah.
Um, uh, so that kind of leads me to asking, like, what has moved you into marketing and branding, and why that's been such a safe, or not a safe spot, but just a spot that you've decided to put yourself into. Was there a
Mm.
key point when you're at school, or was there something that kind of clicked, or was it when you were younger, or what kind of helped you there?
Yeah. I think I've always been a fan of stories and how they can move people. And once I kind of figured out, when we have access to technology or digital, we're able to craft those stories. And then I kind of saw, I don't know, that human element of crafting, personal human stories and taking someone's story and kind of sharing it online, whether that's in an interview or podcast or LinkedIn, other social media. And I think the the kind of light bulb moment for me was seeing that um, you can kind of turn the world of qualifications on its head when you're able to kind of build your own stories. And I really like that freedom of just sharing stories and kind of having a theme and a narrative. And if people want to listen, they listen. And if they don't, they don't. And you don't really need a degree or the right time, right place to share a story. You just need to start doing it. And I think that at the heart of things has really drawn me into the world of marketing, because if you're good at it, people call you, and if you're not, no one listens. And so it's kind of this world of supply and demand and how you can weave a story to an audience, and that really fascinates me in how you can do that.
So with storytelling, and now with like kids and everything's, especially that you work around Gen Z, or you work with the younger, obviously, their attention span is so little nowadays. Every piece of content, like I can only imagine how many people actually scroll through and watch the 1 minute Instagram videos. Even TikToks are super short. All these things. It just seems like everything. Obviously, Vine was a 6 second platform that didn't end up working out, but it's still you know gave birth to a lot of other things. And for a
Mm,
time, it seemed like long form was where it's at, but it seems now it's even gotten back to short form. If you look at some of the biggest YouTubers like David Dobrik, or Logan Paul, or these guys, they're all
mm,
doing like it's maximum 5 to 6 minutes. Obviously, David Dobrik's are always like around the 4:30 mark. How is it that do you think that even on a YouTube ad per se, it's like 6 seconds you have to really grab
yeah.
someone's attention? How do you grab attention then in this short form, that you have this minimal amount of time, especially in an ad form too, in marketing, because no one wants to pay attention to marketing as well in most cases, especially on YouTube. Like I don't watch a 6 second ad, I would just wait for the skip ad to
Yeah.
come up. So how
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
they have form, or have you ever seen any really successful front of stage YouTube ads, those ones that you can skip in 6 seconds? Or is there a certain time length that you think that really grabs, like that is the shortest you see that can really grab their
Mm,
attention? Because that's something I'm curious about,
yeah.
especially trying to tell a story,
Totally.
not
I got
marketing.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts on this and happy to riff on this because I think it really is a flexible model. Um, but the framework I'd want to share with your listeners and just your feedback on is case in point, you need a value proposition of why people are listening. And I think how you can acquire that first kind of trust muscle or attention muscle is through building it through kind of these smaller feedback loops. Maybe that's a photo on Instagram, maybe that's a quick interview on LinkedIn or YouTube. But as you build trust and as you build community growth, I think you then gain permission to explore longer content. Because at the end of the day, you will have people that show up every day on your content if you continue to provide amazing value. There's paid email newsletters I subscribe to and read daily. There's hour-long podcasts I listen to because I know the host's doing a phenomenal job. And then thirdly, there's YouTubers I watch that are 10, 20 minutes because I speak so highly of their content and we have a relationship. And I think all of those things, if I was to share, those will vary in time, but it's all pinned on the value proposition that that creator is providing. And I think if you have a value prop and you've built trust with an audience, they will lean on you to hear what you're willing to teach or share with them. And then I think the time just becomes a byproduct of whatever you're teaching them. What do you think?
Listen, the one thing that I took in that I thought was really interesting is when you said feedback loop, because the feedback loop, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, the feedback loop is, and what you're kind of seeing as is where like, as you're posting more and more pictures or you're putting out more and more content, you're kind of making people see it and then be triggered to either come to your platform or take more in of you or go to your shop or whatever your next step is. I know
Yeah.
I've read a book on the feedback loop back in the day. Was like it was something about like how they got, obviously
Was
toothpaste
this Lean
when you
Startup by Eric Ries?
I think it is because it's the one about with like toothpaste and getting toothpaste to be a part of the feedback loop where people knew like, hey, if I'm brushing my teeth, I'm gonna put toothpaste
Yeah.
on everything like that. That's where I was first kind of introduced to the feedback loop. So it's interesting
Mm-hmm.
that you said that because I've never thought of it in that way when it comes to social media to do,
Mm.
or that you're putting these people into a feedback loop, which kind of sounds
Yeah.
negative, but you're just putting out content to then trigger them at some point to either
Mm.
come to your platform, which is interesting. I'd love to see, like, kind of see if you had anything to elaborate on that because I think that's a really interesting point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we can keep chatting. I think the big thing for your listeners, if they're in marketing, you're just wanting to explore this, is I think the best marketing and specifically kind of community branding around an idea is the art of kind of A/B testing and responding to what your audience needs with still having an intent to follow uh, and remain on brand to your topic, to your industry. And so I think if you're not creating cross dialogue to listen to what your audience needs, you are out to lunch and another piece of content will steal their attention that does a better job at that. And the best creators I know, they have these feedback loops to inform and educate them on how they can make their content stronger and how they can actually better serve their community. And so I think if we do one thing for 5 years and we figure out, no one likes it or it's not working or it's not growing, that is the creator's fault because they haven't built those feedback loops to A/B test. But if you're someone that's willing to test new things, ask for feedback, gain some insight from your viewers, I think you'll be able to build a model that's not only more sustainable, but more valuable to the end user.
Do you think that's why a lot of YouTubers or people, even like not even when I say YouTubers, I don't even mean just like the David Dobrik's or the Logan Pauls. I mean like the Gary V's of the world or other people too. That's why they always want people to comment and actually give things to then make changes and make testing. I mean, does that kind of play a part into that testing? Because when I hear A/B testing in my head, I go straight to thinking like two different versions of something and then to get testing back. But when you're
Mm.
saying a YouTube video, would it be comments or? Like, what else can you?
Yeah, I think like it's little things like posting at different times of the day, using different language, using different branding, using different, timing with your videos, like all these little things you can kind of swap out. And on a Google Sheet, you can just record it and how it performs differently. And then I think if you're able to reflect with your team at the end of the week or end of the month, you can report back on, hey, we did this and it performed wildly successful. Let's try that again next week and see if this is a trend. I think, those people you mentioned, they're probably way ahead of the game on this, but they probably have team that review their content and their execution on a weekly basis. And I think the comments play it's an algorithm piece as well, where the platform will rank the content piece higher because of the engagement. But it is also free feedback where their most, loyal fans are sharing their thoughts, and the social team can scrape that all together and put that together in their monthly report to switch their content for the following month.
And so I've always seen, and I don't know, like from what I've seen from most brands on Instagram or social media, it just seems like a lot don't do well, and there's very, very, very few, like, the Wendy's or the Burger Kings of the world that have like found this very, like, whether it's in a joking sort of way that's been able to help them out. Why is
Mm.
it that brands sort of have a hard time, I guess, on social media? From my standpoint, I've only seen brands like they're not up there in the millions or 2 millions or anything like that. Most of them are just doing ads and getting people to go through that. Why is there a reason for that? Is that because people just have a negative look on that sort of thing and people don't want to follow? Is it because these brands don't know how to
Mm.
properly put out content, or
So you're saying, like, why do brands not jump on the social bandwagon?
that? And I feel like most of them don't, like, even if, like, I'm comparing, like, even if you look at the difference of Gary Vee as a personal brand versus VaynerMedia as a brand on Instagram, it's very different. Like, Gary Vee is way up there versus nobody will go and follow VaynerMedia, even if, Gary Vee
Yeah,
has 10 million followers. Like, is there a reason as to why that is? Is that because brand people just don't have a, like, people want to see people on social media and that's why they go to it? Like, is there a
yeah,
reason for that? And how do companies kind of work their way through it?
yeah. I think a thought on that I've had, and you can take business leaders as an example, or even our friends. I think there's a personal preference toward how a person or a brand wants to be positioned. Some people are quite private and they like the brand or the employees to do the talking. Some people are quite conservative and they don't like having their story publicly available. Some 7, 8, 9 figure entrepreneurs no one knows about and they live quietly,
Yeah.
you know, away from themselves. And then other people, nothing against them, they choose to share publicly about their success and reframe how they've built their empires. And I think there's not a right or wrong. I respect both schools of thought. And it can be misleading to younger entrepreneurs or business people that see, oh, like, should I be sharing? Should I not be sharing? I don't think it's a right or wrong. I think it's more so what aligns with your personal mission as a person, but also understanding I choose to see social media as a tool for good. And I know that it can rapidly expedite the trust process to build with a community or a person. And so I would be pro social media, but I have mentors and friends that they're off of social media and they are wildly successful, and no one needs to know about them because they are still doing so well in business, and their personal life is just as successful as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I know the Lumen 5 founder, Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, he is so funny. He speaking about people who don't post a lot, he literally posts just videos of him like surfing or whatever. He has like 800 followers, and I'm like, you run a very successful company. He's like one of the only companies to have 200,000 active users with zero marketing, and he just
Mm.
literally doesn't post anything. He posts
Yeah.
once in a while, and it's always funny seeing that because it's like, okay, that gives hope to people who can still run. Like, you don't need to be Gary Vee. You don't need to be
Yeah.
posting all this content all the time about yourself. to be
Mm,
this wildly successful person in business. Like it's a I it just depends on how you go about it. I mean, it might not hurt to post, or it might only be additional onto
totally.
it, but you know, it doesn't mean that that's the only way to success is by posting on social media. Like there were businesses that were successful without doing that. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the biggest businesses you don't even know. Like Tim Cook doesn't have Instagram and he runs Apple. Like it's just like it just
Yeah.
doesn't always work like that. But no,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I've always found those very interesting because like, and you know them usually too. It's like you know them personally because otherwise, how do you know that they don't have social media or anything? And
Yeah.
it's always funny seeing that, especially like the older folk too, that
Mhm.
run bigger businesses and stuff.
And I think it can be a mark of a great entrepreneur because I think it does show humility and it kind of shows that they lead from behind. And I think if anything, it's a green flag to their character and who they are, because they don't need to be in the public. And that's something I've learned and I'm challenged by as I share on social. But on the flip side, I love to challenge those wildly successful people. And I say, do you ever have an urge to kind of mentor others? Or do you ever have an urge to share your story? Or, hey, I find that you're having a tough time recruiting a CEO for that new operating company you have. And so there is these really neat parallels where you can spin a lot of benefits by building an audience and by pivoting them on different questions or ideas. But they, I think, choose to take a different side. And as a result, they don't have those opportunities to innovate. And maybe they don't view those same opportunities as important to the other social media leaders.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I think that as time grows, I think it really only adds to your company.
Mhm.
Like it's not going to hurt your company if you feel that I don't know, something might go wrong because you guys are on social media, like maybe,
Yeah.
but that just really depends on how you do it. If you do it, right, or even just having social media in a way kind of just helps as long as, some people, I mean, if you follow like Gary Vee's even come back on it, if most people think like, oh, you have to post 50 times a day or whatever, right? That he goes on and says, and he also says like, hey, you guys can post however much you like. It's just, go on and do, sort of something if that's what you want to do at the
Mhm.
end of the day. But some people have wildly successful companies where they just sell, B2B doesn't always need to be on social media. Like that's literally just
Mhm.
picking up the phone and making phone calls and getting stuff done. So um, I think, there are companies that are just around it. So you do make a good point there. Um,
Mhm.
I do want to talk about, I think this is just a funny sort of point, but you went to TWU and I
Yeah.
I think most people just from if you were in Vancouver and saw how successful you are in what you're doing, that most people would probably not assume that you went to TWU. I think that's something that only Vancouver people would probably think. I think most people probably think you went to UBC or SFU. So I'd love to kind of speak on that and what experiences or maybe you had at TWU that you have think have carried on to your success here now and maybe has projected you, whether it was in classes or professors or anything in that, because I think TWU needs some love in some cases. So
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think um, if I could give more of like a meta answer, I guess you could call it, if I'm using that right. Um, I think university is a vehicle that truly, shifts the trajectory of your life and kind of your direction, but it doesn't always need to be on the experience and education side. And I say that because I think the biggest thing that shifts the trajectory of our life is the relationships we have. And that was my, fondest value takeaway from TW was the people I met, and that would be the professors, the classmates, the alumni, and just the community at large. And I think I did enjoy my classes, but maybe like some of your listeners, I chose to kind of do the heavy lifting and the heavy learning outside the class because I was kind of a doer and a builder. And so I think when I was younger, people around me placed more stress on the university brand than I believe there should be. I think it's just one of the school of thoughts that can influence your thinking and your life direction. But by no means do I believe it's the only school of thought. And so I would sit down and riff with other friends that might pay more or go to different schools to have different thoughts and leadership advice. But I think at the end of the day, it's how you choose to use that vehicle. It's how you choose to, learn and develop relationships within a community. And the thing that's kind of shaped me most as a person is, what I took away on how to build great relationships and how to, build community around a topic. And I think we need to reframe the question to say, where am I wanting to go and how am I wanting to be shaped as a person versus will this degree get me a job?
Hmm. That's something like because I went to BCIT and
Okay.
I visited the diploma program there,
Yeah.
and I thought it was great. And I think that BCIT's form of education is so different from what you get at another school in a way, because every project or everything revolved around what is this like in real life? Like, okay, what is actually going to happen in real life? It isn't, hey, like, this is just a project and you hand it in. It's like, no, this project involves doing a whole presentation that's like highly judged, and you have to
Mhm.
figure out this as a team because all your components are in teams. So it's like, okay, what are you going to be like when you get into real life? Like, everything kind of works in teams unless you're, you know, even if you're a solo tennis player or a solo business, you have to do things with other people. And that's one thing that I think that from my time at BCIT I took, which was great. Like, even I was in the entrepreneurship option of the marketing
Mhm.
management diploma, and I had my one teacher, Rick Croach, and he was the head of entrepreneurship there. And so every year, and entrepreneurship kids had the hardest project slash presentation of any diploma there. It was crazy the thing you'd have to go through. So kids would have to go in, do a presentation. It was like a venture growth class, and you'd have to pick a company, and you have to do a
Mhm.
whole presentation on how it could grow, and you have to take it from the 500 top list or whatever in Canada. And so they go in, and he would sit down and he would make one of your or two of your group members go get him a coffee, and then one group member was only allowed to speak, so you had to know the entire thing. And this was all like, you had no information going in. Like, sometimes the other year school members would kind of give you a heads up and let you know what happens, but at the end of the day, like, you don't know that you're going to be the only one talking, or these things might go wrong. He unplugs projectors. He doesn't One group, he didn't let any of the guys talk. He only let the girls talk, because one time the guy made a comment about girls one time in the class, so he didn't let him talk, and he only let the girls talk. So there's things. And like in my group, he pushed he we were in groups of four, and he asked all of us to leave, stand
Mhm.
outside. He went through our entire presentation and let us come back in, and he said he had no questions, and that was it. Like, that was the presentation. We didn't even get to present. And we ended up getting a good mark, which was mainly because he didn't have to ask any questions or anything like that, which was surprising to us and kind of a reliever when we all got sent outside that we wouldn't have to present. But watching some kids go up there and feel like they need to like swear or something, but like you were actually getting through like these, you know, real life situations that could happen. Obviously, they're dramatic, but it's like nice to
Mhm.
know the dramatic side of it and understand like, hey, that can help you. That's why I think that, not to get on a tangent of BCIT, but I think that's why BCIT does a little bit things differently, where you have projects that
Yeah,
are more real life. And all
totally.
the teachers, mainly, a lot of the teachers are people who practice still and are still in the workforce.
Mhm.
So they're up to date and kind of have a knowledge, but obviously the marketing classes, how up to date can you be when things change every day? But
Mhm.
most of the classes wise, you're learning things that are, you should be using every day, that if you talk to any other university student, they'd be like, well, we wouldn't have done that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Um,
Yeah. No, that's great points. And I think like at the end of the day, it's kind of what you make of where you are, right? And as corny as that sounds, like some people are going to listen to this podcast and they, maybe just will listen to it and go to something else. And then some people will listen to this and they'll actually change how they act. They'll change how they, look at social media. They might try and integrate something they've learned. And I think everyone kind of activates or takes next steps on what they learn in different ways.
mhm.
And I think it's just kind of what you choose to do with what you're presented with.
Yeah, no, exactly. Um, so when it comes to personal branding, what's sort of some things I know besides like sort of just starting and get out there and like obviously like, you know, take a video yourself or start talking or doing something. What sort of like, maybe even just like tactics or things they should know about themselves when it comes to branding, or maybe it's like they need to look in themselves at a certain way. Like what if someone's going to start their own personal brand? Maybe they're already running a company, maybe they have nothing and they just want to have a personal brand. What sort of some
Mm,
things they could do to kind of maybe map themselves out a little bit?
yeah, no, great question. I think the biggest thing is that everyone already has a personal brand. I'm pretty sure Jeff Bezos quotes it as, your 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 personal brand is kind of who you are when you're outside the room, what people say about you. And so if you're someone that's consistent at work and you drive a lot of value, that's what your bosses are talking about you when you're not at work. If you're out with your friends, then you go to the bathroom or you miss a hangout, like who you are and the value you bring as a person is something that they're chatting about. And my challenge to people with uh, a 50-year career ahead of them or a certain passion or industry they're wanting to get into is basically take the initiative to start building equity into your career and personal story. Because I think it's really just at the end of the day, kind of sharing about who you are so that someone can build trust with you before they've ever met you.
Okay. And so specifically, moving in onto LinkedIn, you're
Yeah.
someone who I think probably started doing LinkedIn probably more than someone, would have at the stage that you were, or at, back in, 2 or somewhat years ago. Um, I would say out of the people that I saw doing LinkedIn, you were definitely one of the people that were doing LinkedIn much differently than how other people were doing LinkedIn. I think you probably took it a lot more seriously than people saw. I think that was the cool part, and to see where you're kind of getting now with it, kind of is that natural kind of movement of, I think you kind of hopped on something that wasn't as big. I think LinkedIn still isn't, like, I think there's a lot of natural growth you can get from LinkedIn as of right now. Um, so what things about LinkedIn, talking about what you just said about personal branding, could they move on to LinkedIn, whether it's, doing maybe some just quick like live shows or something like that? Like what kind of things on LinkedIn specifically? Since I know
Yeah.
that's, I know that you're probably wanting to live on more than just LinkedIn, but that is
Yeah.
a place that, um, yeah.
Totally. I think the biggest thing is start, building a community around the industry that you're passionate about. We were chatting a bit about Treno, and like my first reaction would be like, I hope your team or your employees are building relationships with some of these PR managers or some of these, sports teams. Like there's endless amounts of people on there that manage the social media marketing for, every NHL, NBA team. And like, to me, it's like, why wouldn't you start reaching out and building those relationships? The second part is start building a voice on what you know or what you want to build authority in. So if that's, something that you're already interested in or something you're already telling your friends, family, work about, start kind of hosting a conversation on LinkedIn once a week where you talk about something you've learned or something in the news or something you're testing out. And I think those would kind of be my top two uh, advice for people getting started.
Was there any like shows or anything that you did at the start? Like what was it? Were you just posting when you first started, or was there things that you kind of did, or?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think my first post was a link to like an HR article that probably had like one like. And so that's kind of your reminder of like everyone starts at zero. Everyone's a human, normal at the end of the day. But I think how I started to get going was I believe in something called student charisma. And that's basically when you're a student, you have a superpower to do anything. And that means you can reach out to anyone, talk to anyone, and they won't get mad because you don't have anything to sell, you don't know what you're doing with your life, and people kind of see you as like a younger version of themselves. And so I kind of noticed that, and so I started interviewing people on my iPhone, and I would just say, "Hey, you're the CMO at A&W," or "Hey, like you're the head of PR at Microsoft Canada. Could you share maybe one tip you have in marketing?" And I would kind of build these video series, and some of them would perform quite well. And they're kind of started to build a following after that.
Do you think there's like, on that note of like asking for just like advice or help, like in the student charisma thing? Because I think when it bottles down to it, do you think that plays more into the fact that people just like, even though if like people don't have time or people don't have things, like especially like busy CEOs or people who are in business, like don't people just kind of like in general like to help when someone asks for help? And does that play kind of a part into the student charisma? Because I know when I was at BCIT, for example, you could reach out to any BCIT alum or even business people. If you say you're a student and you're just looking for some advice or some help, most of the time, I don't know what the actual conversion rate is. I feel like everyone's different, probably how you word it, but like most of the time, like they'd be willing to help or just shoot you a little message back. Do you think that plays a part into it? I think like the natural human just wants to help.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, and I think the other part too, Taylor, is we do have to understand people are busy and they're taking care of kids or something's wrong with their health, and there's going to be times where you'll get a no and you'll get no response and you'll get crickets, and that is life. That's part of the idea chasing. But I think that's part of the strategy of doing something long term, and just being open to, even if you get those no's, be in pursuit of the yes.
Mm,
I think if you can kind of frame your expectations around, oh yeah, totally okay, like you're handling three kids, you're starting a business, and you're, working on something from your home, like no worries if you don't have time. Thanks for even responding. And I
mm.
think like we have to change our expectations where our world doesn't revolve around us, and we're coming into other people's worlds where we want to share ideas with them. And the magic of that happening is when we position how this idea could possibly benefit them. So if I was, yourself or maybe one of your listeners where they've gone to BCIT or U of A or they've worked at your company, position that in the story to kind of show that alignment, and maybe see how you can pull in how this might benefit the other person by having a conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that there's always like how you word it. That's kind of what I mentioned. It's like really that conversion rate is really how you word it. Obviously, if you're asking for help and it's like very direct and like, hey, you have to help me, obviously people would be like, well, I don't have to help you. But if you kind of say in just a way of like, hey, like I know you're busy. If you have time, can you please give me a thing? And I think most people will kind of look at that and be like, okay, well, that person realizes I'm busy and shows that kind of hey, I realize people do have lives outside of my life. So,
Mm.
I'm more willing to help. And, does that sort of play? I know you mentioned in your TEDx that you do have mentors. And so what's your take on mentors? And do you kind of recommend them for everyone? Or is it something that you feel is more of a personal, just hey, this is something that depends on who you are, I guess?
Yeah, I'm a strong believer that we need to have relationships with people and curate learning in our day-to-day life that challenges our thinking. If you have only people that speak the world of you, it becomes an echo chamber, and I think that can build a bad ego mindset. And so I personally like to recommend to friends, and I try to do this personally, where I'll seek out relationships that I know will challenge me and push back in a healthy way. And that's why I like to kind of build those community systems around me, and especially having relationships with people that don't have the same worldview as you. So yeah, I think that would kind of be my take on that.
Yeah, I think it's always good. I think my one look at it is always that, hey, if you can have someone that has gone through mistakes and has gone through things that they can just easily say, hey, this is a mistake I made. Don't make this mistake. You kind of putting yourself in a position where, hey, like you could skip a whole 5 years of your life making mistakes just by having someone that helps you and says, hey, like, this is mistakes I made, don't make this mistake, do that. Obviously, there's mistakes you naturally want to make. And so you can learn and do those things. But I think my whole viewpoint is like, if you have a mentor, or even like people that I've added to my business that are then able to just propel us differently, because if you have someone that's made mistakes or they've done certain things, then they're just able to help you. And that's how I kind of view it in a way too.
Mm,
Having mentors is great to be able to learn from them. I think also if you speak to, just older people in general, they're always able to help you, in an indirect way of mentoring, whether it's through business or just in life. Um, and they just kind of help you like don't make mistakes, or maybe you listen to them, you don't really take it in, you still make that mistake, but at least you
yeah,
kind of had a good idea going in, like, hey, like this is a mistake that someone else has made, this isn't just something that's going to happen to me. Is always a good way. I think that kind of plays a part in why I think like mentors are always good. I think definitely what you kind of get on having those relationships and everything like that is great. I think also having that, taking the time and shortening it, because I think the way you can shorten the distance to something is always good,
mhm,
especially in the amount of time. I think also in like if you look at it the way of like how Elon Musk or these big guys say like, hey, if you work 80 hours a day, you're going to get somewhere in half the time of someone working 40 hours a day, or 40 hours a week, 80 hours a week. Um, so it's just, I think those all kind of interject in between. Obviously, there's like people who don't have mentors and they're still able to get somewhere based off of certain life experiences. But I think just having mentors in general, or someone that's able to help you guide. I think that's why most businesses have board of advisors or board of directors, because you still need people to advise and give you. It's like not like this just one person can get that business to wherever. Personal branding, that's why you look for the comments like you're saying and everything like that, to then test and get comments back. And it's not mentoring per se, but you're also taking in information so you can get yourself somewhere.
mhm.
It's always an interesting, something that a lot of people, I think the successful people do, because that's how you got to do it. I think there's some formulas for success that are obvious that a lot of people don't spend some time on. And that's like just taking in information. I think Jeff Bezos's biggest thing and how I would run any company through is that your customer comes first. Like, why am I making a product that I don't think that somebody else would use? If I just listen to my customers and they tell me, hey, what do I want? Well, then you're just going to go so much farther. And that's just listening and learning. Um, but yeah, I think mentors are a big thing, and I think I like that, the point that you made and how you also treated your mentor. If people want to listen to your TEDx talk, which is even cool, I think. How do you even swing a TEDx talk? How have you swung two? You've swung two, not just one. You swung two of them now. How have you been able to do that?
Yeah, they're kind of pretty public, and so it's kind of open application for anyone. Sometimes if you kind of know the team, they might tap you on the shoulder and ask for an application. So I had a little bit of that when you're sharing your story. People kind of know when they ask you to apply. But for your listeners, I actually applied to my first TEDx talk and got rejected, and that was a great learning moment of preparing something, working hard, giving your pitch, and then getting the know and learning from that. And then after that, a couple wins came where I got to share on the stage. But um, I think it's like a great learning process, and I'd recommend it to anyone that is kind of looking to share a particular story.
Well, I think this was great. I think that really kind of hit a lot of those points about branding and marketing. And to speak on that, where can they find you? What's up next? And what's Joel Hansen up to next on?
Yeah, they want to look me up, they can definitely give me a search on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, and recently started a YouTube channel just to kind of help people out with these sort of questions. And then I've just recently launched a website. So if people just want to look up joelhansen.com, they can just see a bit more of the stories and what I'm working on.
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for your time, Joel.
Yeah, thanks so much. And anyone that's wanting to connect for a chat, feel free to send out a note.